Welcome to Champion Stepdad Podcast. We are exploring the unique role of stepdads, stepfathers, and bonus dads, and how to apply performance psychology skills to become a better father figure and role model. Building a band of brothers by focusing on empathy and accountability. Join the Champion Stepdad Facebook group and build your band of brothers. I'm your host, Neil Wattier. I'm a 16-year stepdad. I'm a resilience trainer and a performance consultant. I'm encouraging you to become a champion stepdad. Today, I host Shaun O'Gorman, a former Australian police officer. Shaun struggled with PTSD, suicidal tendencies, and unhealthy behaviors before taking control of his life. His book, My Dark Companion, shares his journey from his darkest days to the life he's living today, one filled with positive relationships, vital health, and a purposeful career. This book is not just a story, it's filled with lessons on how to live a great life. Shaun and I carried on such a great conversation, I couldn't bring myself to cut him off. This is a long episode at almost 1 hour and 15 minutes, but totally worth his great input and perspective. I encourage you to subscribe to the Strong Life Project podcast. It is one of my daily lessons. You talk about accountability. Shaun brings it every single day. He's done over 1,800 podcast episodes, and they're not hard listens. They're only about 10 to 12 minutes a piece, but he puts them out every single day. The dude is a beast. Visit his website at thestronglifeproject.com. He has a free video series called The Strong Foundations for a Strong Life, which walks you through 6 key foundations that will give you the energy and focus to do the work to create an amazing life. Shaun O'Gorman, thanks a lot for joining me on these Champion Stepdad podcast. Great to have you on the show, man.
Thank you so much, Neil. My pleasure. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah, so you and I have had a couple conversations before. I had you on a previous podcast, actually the Neil Wattier podcast, where I talked about resilience and performance. And I ended up finding you almost by accident because of the podcast and the show that you produce. So you have the Strong Life Project, which is a coaching business, but then you also put out a daily podcast. And the reason why I love it so much, and honestly, it's a daily listen for me, is it's a no BS accountability type podcast. And I think that's a great match for what we're trying to do with Champion Stepdad. So first of all, for those of you listening, man, go check this thing out. It's amazing. And then Shaun, give us a couple minutes of who you are. I know you got a background in law enforcement, but now you're doing coaching and just trying to help people live a great life.
Yeah, so it really the short version, which I think I've got better at doing now, grew up in a very middle class Australian city, Brisbane in Australia. Then my dad was a police officer for 42 years. Mum worked in the government. So very Irish Catholic background. Mum and dad got divorced when I was 12. I struggled with that a lot. As a teenager, just didn't have much of an identity. My dad wasn't around a lot. And even though I worshipped him back then, and him and I, we're still very close, but we're very close friends, mates more so than we are father and son. And I joined the police at 19, joined the police canine unit at 22, loved it, like it was amazing. Heaps of, it sounds really funny to say if you haven't been in military or law enforcement, but heaps of great stuff, as in a lot of violence. Like I've been shot at in one incident dozens of times, had 2 people shoot themselves right in front of me, taking guns off so many people, had guns pulled at me multiple times, knives, fights, running through, the bush at 3 o'clock in the morning, chasing somebody with a gun with just myself and a German Shepherd dog that I'm relying on, which sounds absolutely insane now you think about it consciously. But as a result of that, I did a couple of years of covert surveillance and undercover work, where working on major organised crime, drug importations and different things. And as a result, I ended up with PTSD and depression really quite badly at 31. And I'd done a fair bit of work with the special weapons team, the SWAT team. It's called the Special Emergency Response Team. I didn't actually do their selection course, and anybody who's a police officer will understand why that's important to say. But I did a lot of work with those guys, so a lot of violence. When I left with PTSD and depression, I battled suicide badly and had done for a number of years pre-leaving my career, because of just that fear of what people thought. I thought I was the only person who had those challenges and struggles. I thought I was the only one that was affected by what I'd seen and done. But now I realise everybody is, we just don't talk about it. And that's police officers, military, anybody has stress, and we just don't talk about it for fear of judgment. Went into the corporate world for 15 years. And actually, the suicide part I should touch on. I breeze over that a bit now. I actually lay in bed 3 nights in a row with a Glock pistol in my hand going to end my life, and it was really dark. I look back now, and that's almost 20 years ago now, and it feels, it's just something I say. There's no emotional impact anymore. I don't have any of the PTSD or depression symptoms. I don't battle suicide, but because I've done the work, mate. And that really is the essence of the whole thing I talk about in the Strong Life, is do the work. Went into the corporate world for commercial real estate for 15 years, and my standard joke is I met more psychopaths there than I did in the police, because that's really just about money. It's about performance. It's nothing about humanity. It's a whole lot about, financial returns. And funnily enough, now I've said some of those people come back to me and want me to go and work and talk about culture in those organizations. It's been great. Then I did a lot of personal development, work with psychologists, all sorts of things for about the last 17 years, but especially the last 16 since my daughter was born. I had a bit of a sliding door moment where she was handed to me in the delivery room. There's a backstory as to why her mum was tied up in the next phase of the birthing process, and she had been in a humidity crib for a little while because she had blocked airways when she was born. So they handed it to me, and I was sitting in the corner of this room on my own, looking down at this little baby, just thinking, holy shit, like, I really need to get my life in order now. Like, there's a reason for me to actually get out of that. I still was battling suicide at that point. Had a fair bit of darkness. I was self-medicating with cocaine and cocaine and ecstasy. Was drinking heavily. Like, I was pretty off the reservation. But now I look back and go, that was a sliding door moment, but I chose it. It wasn't, God didn't speak to me. There wasn't a flash of light. I was literally just went, oh shit, now I need to take responsibility for myself, essentially. I was 35. So unfortunately, a bit of a late bloomer in the self-responsibility stakes. But divorced then, separated at 42. I had a second daughter born in 2008. She's 13 now, so 16 and 13-year-old daughters who I love to death. Then mum and I have a very challenging relationship that's deteriorated further over the years, unfortunately, which I thought would be the opposite. So we've just ended a 3-year family court battle. I've seen my daughters for 6 hours since September. So it's really emotionally, it's a real challenge. And there's days when I'm in tears and it's really dark. And most of the time I'm pretty resilient with it now. I send them videos every day, text them, go to their sport when that's on. But during COVID, that's been, fairly rare. So, like, been some real challenges in it, mate. But all of those things now, I started the Strong Life Project about 10 years ago, but I've been doing it full-time for 3.5. And I do a lot around high-performance executive coaching, mentoring, like one-on-one coaching for people with all sorts of different things. I do a lot of keynotes and workshops, a lot of work in corporate around resilience, around leadership and culture, and the same with military and police. So a very varied career in my business now. I've done 1,850 of those daily podcast episodes you were talking about, which I love. And to me, that's just something I committed to in 2000. I looked yesterday, 28th of December 2015 was the first one. And, mate, I look now and just think the life I lead now I love. And even the challenge of my daughters is immense. The rest of it's superb. I've got a beautiful partner for about 7 years. She's just a phenomenal person. I look after myself well. I train hard. I do all of those things. And I live this life I love because I put the effort in, as opposed to the 35-year-old me whose life was pretty awful. I was a victim then. Now I take responsibility. Really, in a nutshell, that's it.
Nice. Yeah. And like I said, I'm a fan of the show. I listen. It's on my podcast. It's a daily thing, or, if I can't get to it daily, the cool thing I like about it is it's just you with whatever scenario came up in your mind, and you're relating it to your life and your experience, and how you use it to affect change, not only in yourself, but other people in your environment. And you're very vulnerable, and another word that has a negative connotation to it, but really the idea of me getting up in front of a camera and a microphone, tell my story, is just to connect with people. I didn't create this thing because I wanted to come out here and tell everybody the answer. I wanted to come out here because I'm trying to discover it for myself. And in the meantime, I'm going to tell you my story because I can connect with you. And that's what you do, is you talk about your family and your challenges. You're very open about your current relationship, your past relationship, the struggles from being a police officer, and the all the whole story. Like, you just lay it out there. And it's really easy to connect with you. And this is what, like only the second or third time that we've talked. Like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah, it's this most, it's this weirdest, it's a weird thing for me, Neil. And it's that because I'm that, I certainly try to be a very loving, connected, emotionally vulnerable sort of guy. And I find I just did, we were talking off air about CrossFit. Like, we're both in the cult, love a bit of CrossFit. So I did CrossFit this morning. And as I was walking out, went and grabbed a quick coffee with a couple of friends of mine I train with. And one of them's a special weapons cop who's a good mate of mine. And Rach, my partner, and I were walking out of the coffee shop, and there's two police officers standing there. And I do a reasonable amount with police in the jurisdiction I live in, where I used to be a cop. And I walked out and I sort of said, and one of them looked at me. And these days, and it sounds really weird for me, it feels very, very bizarre, but people, like some police officers recognise me, or I caught up with a paramedic the other day to help her with some stuff, and she's like, oh, I sort of feel like I'm fangirling. I've been so excited to meet you. And to me, it feels really, really strange, right? Because I just think I'm a very, very normal Aussie guy. I'm just very flawed. There's so many things about me that aren't spectacular at all. I seem to have a little bit of a natural talent for telling my story and speaking, and I've been doing it for a long time. 1,800 podcasts has helped that, right? I've written a book about my story, all of those things. I've got a second book I've written that I'm just rewriting to publish now. And the thing, Neil, out of all of that is the overarching thing I realised, these two police officers this morning, I said, hey, guys, how are you? And this guy goes, oh, hey, man, how you going? And I could tell he recognised me from my work. And I said, oh, yeah, good, mate, really good. And I said, have a great day. And he goes, yeah, you too. And I could see that him lift, like his spirits lift, and his partner sort of looked at him like, you could see it was like a bizarre reaction, because they would normally, cops are pretty shut off, right? Now, and I walked away from that going, if I can be someone who's open everywhere in my life, if I'm talking to you, same thing, like I feel like we know each other well, we've spoken 3 times. It's that whole thing going, that vulnerability piece for me, especially talking about stepdads, right? For men, we suck at emotional vulnerability. We suck at showing the real people we are. I'm a 6'2", 95 kilos. So what's that? Probably 210 or something, 215 pounds. I've got a couple of tattoos. Like, I'm not you wouldn't look at me walking down the street and think I'm this loving, vulnerable, emotionally connected guy from the way I look. But that's what I really want to try and get across to men is go, if you can just drop the wall, drop that mask, and stop being scared of what people think, it's just easier. It's just easy. You don't have to be full of shit and pretend you're someone you're not. It's just easy.
That's a lot of effort to be full of shit.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something where, whether it be you just, basically talking to your camera or a microphone, right? Like, cause you don't do interviews. You just talk about whatever. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I'll host conversations. But it's about creating the space. Right. And I was actually just, I had an interview with James Golden, and he talked about just creating the space, right? Because sometimes it's, guys like you and I who are willing to put ourselves out there, and, you've been doing it much longer than I have. But just the willingness to do it, to create the space, whether, we're posting videos on YouTube or we're creating, Facebook, or people are on Clubhouse. Like, it's just a matter of creating the space. And hell, it could be out in your backyard and, around a fire pit with some friends, right? It doesn't matter. Yes. The location. It doesn't matter the medium. What matters is that you're willing to create the space so that people can have the conversations that they need to have. Right. And you create the groups. And so that's why I was so excited about Champion Stepdad is there's all kinds of stepdads out there, and there's all kinds of stepdad groups. I went on Facebook and I joined 2 or 3 of them before I started this one. And I'm like, these are great and all, but you guys are not having great conversations. There's a lot of bitching and moaning on there. And there's some people that are having some good conversations. But I wanted to create something where it was 100% dedicated to development. That it's not like, if you want to come and you want to complain, that's fine. Because I've got one of my main things, and that's how I do, whether I'm doing group coaching or individual coaching, or I'm doing, workshops with military members, I'll listen to you complain all day long. Right. Yeah. But at some point, I'm going to ask you the same question. Okay, that happened. Now what? Doesn't matter who I'm talking to. The question always comes down to, got it. That happened. And that is not meant to minimize the pain that you experienced or the pain that you're experiencing now. It's about what are you going to do about it? And I hear that so much in the episodes that you put out. It's the constant message of, okay, got it. Like, that was tough. What are you going to do about
it? I'll use a really quick example. It's nothing to do with stepdads. There was a woman who I actually helped her daughters out with. Her daughter was struggling with some pretty significant emotional impact. They've had a fair bit of violence, family violence, in the relationship with their dad, and they're estranged from him now. And I met the mum through, I did some work for the company she works for, and we just got talking. Really nice woman, and we ended up having a chat over a number of times. I caught up with her and her daughters to help her daughters with some stuff. They're similar age to my girls. And her and I had a conversation one day for, like, it was 20 minutes long. I remember it vividly. I was in the car. I was pulling up at a shopping mall, and we were talking, and I said to her, we'd become pretty good friends by that point. I said, have you had any sexual abuse in your past? And she goes, it's silent. She goes, yeah. And she had some significant sexual abuse as a really young child. And she said, yeah, and it really messes with me now still. And she's in her early 40s. I said, cool. So we had this conversation, mate. And the thing that I find often, Neil, I'll say things to people because it's very much from my heart. It's very much that intuition, the heart, following my feelings. I don't sort of try and think about it, because if I think about it, the fear gets in my way. And I said to her, I said, do you still carry physical injuries from that? And she didn't give me a lot of detail, but the detail she gave me, it was pretty, like, horrific stuff. Not that there's any good sexual abuse, but it was on a pretty, severe end. And she said, no, I don't carry any physical injuries. I said, cool. I said, stick with me, because I'm going to sound like a real asshole, but I want you to just explore a concept with me. I said, if somebody had broken your arm at that very young age, would it have the same impact as that sexual abuse? And she goes, well, no. I said, of course not. I said, so you wouldn't have the physical injury of a broken arm, and you don't have a physical injury from sexual abuse. I said, so as understandable as it is, and I absolutely acknowledge that's a horrific thing I don't understand. And I said, I'm not trying to diminish your experience, but I want to give you a different perspective. I said, why is it different? And she goes, well, great question. I don't know why. And I said, I get it is. Societally, we say it is, and I accept it is. And have your arm broken or sexual abuse is a far more impactful thing. But what if it wasn't? I said, what if you look at it and go, it's impacted you for over 35 years? Is it time to let it go? Is it time to not let it impact you anymore? I said, I still don't think it's the right thing. And she was silent, and she burst into tears, and she goes, holy fuck, I've never thought of it like that. You're right. And literally, now I've spoken about it with her since, she goes, it just doesn't have the same impact now. And I go, because it's so much, mate, things happen to all of us. Like, I lay in bed with a Glock in my hand, I don't see my kids, like, whatever your stories are, we've all got them, but we get attached to them as part of our identity. And then we live into that. And the really sad part is then the thing doesn't happen once, it happens every freaking day for the rest of your life. Yeah, and I just want to see people over and over. Yeah, mate. And I don't want people to live in that, right? Because I lived in it for years. Now I'm like, well, I was choosing to still let it impact me. And it's controversial to use sexual abuse, right? Because that's a horrific thing. But if that woman can get a handle on that, then I'd challenge your audience to go, well, what's the thing that you're holding on to that you can let go of? Is it a divorce, another relationship, your boss was this, your mum and dad were that, whatever? We can choose to let that stuff go.
Yeah, we're a combination of our biological personality, right? What our biological makeup, and nature, what our experiences, right? We are a combination of those two things, no doubt. And we shouldn't discount things that have happened to us, but you can't let them control you. And sure, I'm not going to try to discount people that have experienced abuse or people that have, had near-death experience. Like, I'm not trying to minimize anything. What I'm trying to explain to you is you're allowing it to control you. And like you said, you're reliving it every single day. It happened to you 30 years ago, but now, because you're reliving it, it actually happened to you yesterday. And we talk a lot about that. And I know you talk about neuroplasticity and neurological, there's a lot of study over the last 10 years that has just blown psychology out of the water. And it's given us so many positive ways, so many productive ways to go with helping people. And the fact that you are not who you are not what happened to you. You are only what you allow yourself to be. And that sounds so like, it just sounds so stupid coming out of my head, but it's true, because
yeah, absolutely.
we have this concept in some of the resilience programs that I teach, that your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and what you tell it is reality. You can tell your mind anything. And that's why things like self-talk and optimism and gratitude and, all these different mind tricks, because that's what they are. When we talk about mental skills training, whether you're talking about athletes, high performers, or an actor getting ready to get up on stage, we are playing tricks on our mind to get us into a certain mental state so that we can accomplish something, right? So why wouldn't that apply to parenting or stepdad or any area of your life? And that goes for trauma as well. If you're experiencing something and you're continuing to re-experience it, you're telling yourself that that's real. That is your reality.
It's that in understanding how the brain works in neurology, and look, as your listeners will learn more and more as we go on, I'm not that smart, but there's some things that I've picked up, right? And two things is this: 95% of our personality is set by the time we're 8 years of age, 7 or 8 years of age. And Dr. Bruce Dispenza talks about this a lot. And then 90 to 95% of that runs subconsciously in our mind now. So me at 51 and you're 47, if we're not consciously rewiring our brain, our neural pathways, our belief systems, what we think is possible in our life, what a relationship looks like, what that means, what money means, what all the stuff, if we just go on what we've always thought, it's like letting the 7-year-old or 6-year-old you drive the bus. It just makes no sense, because, it's called epigenetics. So genetics, obviously, our DNA. Epi means on top of. So it's the nurture part of nature and nurture. So if you look at that, and then you go to the second part of it, which is every one of us, you and I, your audience, has watched a horror movie and had a fear response, had that visceral, physiological fear response of, oh, shit, I need to get out of here. Now, I'm not a genius, but we all know that's not real. Nobody was in that horror movie thinking it was a real thing. You paid the money, you went into the cinema, or you got it on Netflix, you sat down with popcorn, you knew it wasn't freaking real. But then we have the physiological and the neurochemical response of adrenaline and everything that makes it feel real. So what you think and what you imagine and what you see your life as, what you visualize, what you see happening in your life is like watching the movie. We believe it's real. That 70,000-year-old caveman and woman part of us believes it's a real response, and then we act into that. So if in your mind, in the stepdad scenario, right? So what I would imagine is a very simple thing as a stepdad, and I'm not a stepdad, but I've got other kids in my life I help out and look after, and I've got a lot of mates who have been. And it's that challenge. Like a simple thing would be, if you're going in the scenario, you go, here's my partner's children. We've had these discussions that I should help parent them, and I'm really happy to. But my belief is every time that happens, I end up getting in the shit because I say something that their mum doesn't agree with, and then all of a sudden I'm the bad guy. So if you have that belief in everything you're doing, then every scenario you go into like that as a stepdad, you're going in already imagining the movie's going to end up like that. So of course it does, because you act a certain way, you read cues and take information through that filter. Then you go, you're defensive. So of course you're going to feel attacked, and it's going to be a problem. Like, it's so much what we perceive is reality. Like, it's the weirdest thing. You go, there is no reality. It's only what we create and what we apply meaning to of the things that happen around us. Like, and it sounds to me very, like I should be jumping on Oprah's couch talking about it. Like, it feels very woo-woo and weird, but it's science. It's actually based in science.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, with you talk about an athlete getting ready to go out on whatever field it is that they play on, they all do this. They all use mind tricks and to change their physiology, to change their perception, to prepare, and you could even go into things like simulation, where I'm preparing to do something, or I want to look back on an experience and change the meaning. Like, we do this stuff all the time. And the way that you can use it more effectively is the best way that I've been able to figure out how to put it is to go from default to deliberate. Because
absolutely,
you talked about that,
awesome.
That the majority of what we do is default mechanisms, because it's a survival mechanism. Everything that happens, and most of it is good, right? It's good and productive. Like, I shouldn't have to think about digesting that burger that I had the other day. Like,
that's right.
It doesn't do me any good, right?
Yeah.
But I don't have to think about breathing, but if I do it more deliberate, I'm going to get better results from it. I can't dictate my heart rate and my blood pressure, but I can't influence it. Right. So there's a lot of things that we can do. And so, getting back to the purpose of our conversation, talking about stepdads is, if you tell yourself something, it's going to be true, right? To whether that be your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your kids. And I want you to get into the story that you were just telling me before you came on about your kids, and, having this mindset of, you know what, no, that's okay. And telling yourself that and giving yourself permission to accept it. So let's go into some of those stories you're talking about. Because, yeah, you said you're not a stepdad, but you have 2 daughters. You face challenging situations. Let's talk about that.
Gorgeous daughters of 16 and 13 and mean the world to me, right? Their mum and I have had some real challenges over the last 8.5 years since we've separated. And we've ended up, I had them for 4 nights every 2 weeks initially. Then we went through a period 3 years ago where I didn't see them at all for about 9 months, went into court. And then it was probably 12 months they didn't stay with me. Then they were with me for then I had them every second weekend for 7 or 8 months. And then for the last 12 months now, I haven't had them overnight at all. And I've seen them, it wouldn't be 25 hours or 30 hours in the last year. So it's really impactful for me. And there's been so many things in that that's happened, but I've had to look at that and go, cool, so how do I influence that if I can't see them? And now my opinion is their mum's really influencing their behavior. That's why they don't come and see me. And I'm really careful. I call my ex-wife the girl's mum, because I actually don't have any anger towards her. I don't want to have that conflict, because number one, I want to be a good guy, but number two, more importantly, I just don't want that stress in my life. So went through the court process, got to the point where I was just like, you know what, it's so stressful for the girls. It's stressful for their mum. It's stressful for me, for Rach. And I was like, this just isn't going to work out. They're not in danger. I think there's probably going to be some emotional and physiological impact, of course, but they're not in physical danger. They've got, the girl's mum has a new partner who I've met a couple of times, who's a really decent man. And I go, they've got a father figure in their life. There's a whole lot of stuff that's happened now where I'm like, and I don't go into a lot of detail because it's not my life, it's theirs, for their privacy. But I look now and I think, cool, how do I influence that impact for me? So I send them videos every day. I text them all the time, tell them I love them all the time. They know I'm here. Somebody I met recently who has done a lot of research on parental alienation said, the more contact you have with your kids, it's like leaving the front porch light on. They know that they can come home anytime. I'm like, perfect. So I look at their dad, the stepdad, and I look at him and I go, I want him, and him and I have had this conversation. I want him, and I've only met him a couple of times, right? So we don't talk often. We're not great friends. I like him. He's a good guy. He's a different guy to me. That's great. He's probably a softer guy. And even in his estimation, when we had a conversation one day at my daughter's touch football, he's like, mate, I'm not an alpha male. I'm not an angry guy. I've never been in a fight. That's not who I am. And I'm like, cool. That's actually the guy I want around my girls, right? He's quite a loving, decent guy. He's got 3 children that are around similar ages to my daughters. The 5 of them get on great. His wife passed away, unfortunately, a number of years ago from cancer. He's a guy that I'm like, I said to him, if I can't be in their lives as much as I want to be, then I want you to be. I'm actually really happy. I said, it challenges me, it upsets me, it breaks my heart. However, that scenario is what it is, and I'm doing what I can to influence that. You're in their life. They have a father figure who loves them. You obviously care about them. You obviously have their back. That's what I want. And that's amazing for it. And he said to me in that conversation, he said, if anything ever happened to the girls, he said, I would let you know, because he goes, I'm not a tough guy. His perception of me is I am. I'm not sure he's right. But he goes, you would know how to handle that. And I go, yeah, absolutely. No problems. Now, that's a challenging thing, because I'm like, there's a whole lot of challenge and nuance. My opinion of the information he's been given about me, no doubt, wouldn't be overly complimentary or positive. You wouldn't imagine. I don't think the girl's mum is going to be there having a conversation. Shaun's the best guy in the world. Oh, you should be friends. He's amazing. I doubt that's the conversation. But I want this guy as the kid's stepdad to be a father figure. I want him to be someone that they can depend on. My goal when the girl's mum and I separated was, my hope was that they would have 4 parents or parental figures who would have influence. So instead of having a mum and dad, they'd have 4 people, 2 couples who were there looking after them that they could go to. Now, at this stage, that isn't working out. because of the conflict with the mum and I. But still, man, I go, that's what I want. I want this guy to know I've got his back. I want this guy to know that I trust him. Now, we've had a conversation in that time, that chat we had, and he said, we have a mutual friend who's an ex-special weapons police officer. He goes, oh, are you, and he has the same surname as me, but we're not related. And he's a bit of a loose character. He goes, oh, is he your cousin? I said, no, but he goes, oh, because he's seen pretty similar, like blah. And I said, yeah. Now, we had a conversation where he thinks I'm a lot tougher than I am. And you could tell, he goes like, he didn't say it in so many words, but there's obviously a level of respect for me where he doesn't want me coming after him if he hurts my kids. And I go, so I'm happy that he has that opinion too, right? Like, so it's this very weird dynamic. But ultimately, I'm like, just because the situation isn't what I want, they have someone who loves them and cares for them. And you would hope that everybody could have that. But for your audience, that's not going to be the case a lot of the time. But when I look at that with my girls, I go, that's a positive thing. And it's being able to separate those things, be an adult about it, interact with people with that emotional connection and vulnerability. It still doesn't make me happy, but it makes me happy to go, he's there to support them rather than there's no one there.
Right. Yeah, that's cool, man. And I think that there's something to be said for guys who are willing to just bring it down a little bit and realize that I don't want to be the only person for my kids. I don't want them to solely rely on me. I want them to have multiple mentors and father figures. And I know I can name off at least 4 guys that if my son or my daughter, even though they're adults now, if they ever needed anything and they didn't call me and they called one of my friends, I would be totally okay with it because I know that those guys, their heart is in the right place and they love and they respect my kids and they want the best for them. So why wouldn't I want more people like that in their lives? And especially him, like he clearly has his heart in the right place. He approached you and started the conversation, and I think it was kind of funny because at first you were like, I was defensive and I'm like, who the fuck does this guy think he is?
Yeah. Because when we had when I had the conversation with him first, and he was like, I just think it's this and this with your kids and you could do this a bit better and you could do, and I was like, yeah, fucking what now? Like in my mind, I'm like, and there was someone else with me at the time, and later on, then they know me very well, and they were like, wow, 15 years ago, that would have been a very different conversation. And I said, oh, do you think? Why? And they go, well, it wouldn't have been a conversation. Right. It would, yeah, right. It would have been more physical violence. And I go, because I had to be really humble to go, okay, yeah, no problems. And understand also, and I think this is a really pertinent thing for your audience, understand that as a stepdad, if it's the biological dad or natural dad or whatever terminology you would use, he has got an opinion of you and you have an opinion of him that's based through a third party who is your spouse, his ex-spouse. So you even look at that and go, do you have an accurate assessment of who he is? Does he have an accurate assessment of who you are? Because that's probably coming through third party. And the smartest thing to do, in my opinion, is why not just sit down and have a conversation with the guy? Now, look, if he's an absolute violent psychopath and there's been a lot of family violence and there's orders in place, absolutely. Don't go near the guy. I get it. I used to make, and this sounds really bad in one way, but I really still think it was a positive thing. I used to make it my mission in life to go to as many domestic violence and family violence incidents as I could as a police officer and put those men in their place. When go there and be like, so you want to hit a woman, so how about we fight? And they, oh, no. And I go, no, because you're a coward. So if it's a man like that, I want to be very clear. Men who are violent to women and kids, like, I have some very strong opinions that say what we should be doing with those men. But most men aren't like that. Most guys are decent men, but most of us are very emotionally shut off because we've been told since we were little, boys don't cry, men don't show emotion, toughen up, man up, all of those things. So you've got you're here as the stepdad. You got the father, the natural dad, whatever you want to call him there, and you've both got egos. You've both got some emotional insecurity. You've both got all this. You're trying to be the tough guy, whatever's going on. Instead of just dropping the walls and go, hey, why don't we catch up and have a coffee or have a beer? Why don't we actually just sit down and have a conversation? Because I want us, like in a lot of ways, I think. And it's what I would love to eventually get with my daughter's stepdad is go, him and I should probably have the relationship where we're talking about the kids and having that interaction, because the girl's mum and I have a real conflict. So maybe him and I can have this relationship and friendship where we can be the co-parents almost that organise it. Why can that not be the case? And I know people who do that, because you take the conflict away from the relationship that didn't work out. Some people have a relationship where they could be amicable and work together, which is fantastic. But I don't think it's the majority. And the thing I say to people, and I work with people with relationship breakdowns quite often, and I'll say to them, I thought I'd come out of my marriage, which was very conflicted, and we'd be these great friends and we'd be great co-parents. And I was just very naive. And I look back now and go, we couldn't get on in a marriage. What makes me think we're going to get on well as co-parents? Like it defies logic, right? But in my naivety, I thought it was going to work.
Wishful thinking.
So the key is, the key is just being that emotionally vulnerable guy. And the more work you do on yourself. So I'm really confident and comfortable in the man I am now. My opinion of me is more important than anyone else's. So therefore, if he doesn't like me or he says something that's judgment or whatever, I'm not going to get angry. I'm going to be like, cool. Why do you think that? Because I'm willing to explore that stuff. I just don't think it's that hard.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of, a lot of things going back to, put your ego away. And, a couple of things I think of. So number one was, going back to challenging your belief system. I mean, you have thoughts about him. He has thoughts about you. What's the real story? Because, in every argument, there's three stories. There's your story, there's his story, and there's the story in the middle. That's the truth. Right. So
absolutely.
And there's a lot of perceptions that go along with that. But I think that's why it's important to challenge your belief systems. And then that leads me to the second thing is it doesn't always have to be what you want. It's about what's the productive end, what's the best outcome for everyone involved. And you might come forward and say, well, I don't give a shit about that guy. Well, okay, well, that's a problem that you've got that you have to figure out because now you're the problem.
Yes. Yep. And really at the end of the day, I believe it should be about the kids, because it should be about the children, because as a father, when I chose to have children, then everything, they have to become the priority until they get to 20 or 18 or whatever, whatever age it is. But at the moment, at 16 and 13, my 16-year-old's got her learner's permit for a driver's license. She's getting out in the world more independently. She's going to have more responsibility as to our relationship, a whole lot of things coming up in the next couple of years. My 13-year-old doesn't. She's still a kid. Now, I chose to have children. So therefore, it became about them first, me second. My suggestion to your guys is, as a stepdad, you also chose to become a father in that relationship, because you make a conscious choice when you meet this woman that you, or whoever, but you meet this person who you fall in love with and you're attracted to and whatever, they come with children, that if you engage in that relationship, you are making a positive decision, a conscious decision to be a father in that relationship, whatever that looks like. So then the children need to become the priority in that part of your relationship. So between the spouse, the dad and the stepdad and, whoever else might be involved, those people need to be working together for best outcome and development of those children. Because otherwise, those kids just grow up with more emotional dysfunction. They become adults and we perpetuate this shit for more generations like we have done for so long already.
Yep.
And to me, you look at society, mate, the way we're going at the moment, it's pretty scary, I think, in a lot of ways. There's, the attitude of entitlement, outrage, and all sorts of things. But that comes back to how we parent our kids. Society is a reflection of how we're parenting our children. I think it's just that simple.
Well, and I spent I'm very honest and open about the amount of time that I spent in mental health and counseling and therapy and trying to get and I know that you've done the same thing and you're very open and honest about that.
Yes.
I talk about, the last 6-month deployment that I did. Within the first 2 weeks, I had, a Thursday at 10 o'clock appointment, and I was at that place because I knew I needed it. And I think the one thing that I don't do regrets, but one of the main things that I think about is I'm sitting here in therapy talking about my relationships and how I was negatively impacted by my parents, thinking about my daughter who's 21, probably in therapy, complaining about, all this stupid shit that I did, so yeah. And that hurts my heart because it didn't have to be like that, but that's reality. Right. So, I can't change what happened in the past. I can make myself better now where I can impact positively my relationships and hopefully help other people learn so that they don't make the same mistakes that I made. And really, a lot of it comes down to self-awareness and willingness to do the work. Right.
Yes, mate. And I had a conversation with a woman the other day who's a stepmom, And we ended up talking a lot about that. And we got to a point where I was like, there's some challenges, some real difficulty in the relationship with the children. And I got to the point and we went through a bit of the background of what was going on. And I said, do you see how you're showing up this particular way, which is giving them this outcome? And I won't go into details, obviously, it's a private thing, but her confidentiality. But when we looked at it, I said, you're operating out of a fear and insecurity. And I said, you're the adult. Now, they're similar ages to my daughters, like 16 and 14, I think. And I said, but those two, and they're two boys, I said, those two kids, you are playing into the evil stepmom role. I said, because you're nagging them, you're getting up them all the time. I said, why don't you just love them? I said, if you actually show them love and affection, even when they're being an absolute nightmare, then I said, because they're probably reacting the way they're reacting because they're hurting, because they're feeling insecure or unstable. There's something in a relationship or in whatever's going on for them that has them in a position of not feeling safe or not feeling loved or not feeling heard or whatever the thing is. And I go back when I was 15 or 16, like I was, my mum and I used to argue all the time. My dad wasn't around. I hardly ever saw him. And we spoke recently, we were talking about it not long ago, a couple of years ago, my mum and I, and she was like, you were really difficult as a teenager, blah, blah, blah. I said, did you ever stop to think for a minute, Mum, that I was just hurting? I said, I didn't feel like anyone had my back. I was so worried about where my life was going. Dad wasn't around, blah, blah. And she stopped and looked at me and just burst into tears. And she was like, oh my God. She goes, I've never even thought of that. So when, as parents, we look at our kids and you go, you know what? Like I'm very open and I am pretty critical of some of the stuff my mum and dad did. My kids are going to be the same. That's called evolution, right? That's just how hopefully we get better as we go. But if you're doing it from the best place, doing it from your heart instead of trying to be right. And one of my favorite concepts is you can be happy or you can be right. Rarely can you be both. So, for me, it's such a simple thing to go in this interaction with this kid, with their mum, with their dad, with whoever, as a stepdad, am I trying to get a happy outcome for everyone or am I trying to win an argument? And if you're trying to win an argument, you're fucked because no one's going to win. Because even if you're right, then that makes someone else wrong. That person's going to be really unhappy. So that's not a win. No one wins.
Yeah.
And it's just that very, very simple thing, Neil, to me to think as men, we are pretty terrible communicators normally. Most men only normally open up when they're, 8 beers into a conversation. And then they normally have drunk enough alcohol or enough whiskey or whatever so that they don't remember it the next day. And we need to be having these conversations as men where we're emotionally vulnerable and open and go, you know what? Yeah, I struggle with this stuff too. What about you? Because it takes a village to raise a kid. So as you said before, having these people, your children go to, those 4 friends, that's the whole village mentality we used to live in. Like it's that whole, when our ancestors lived in tribes, there wasn't a mum and a dad that raised kids. There was a whole group of uncles and aunties. And when you look at different cultures that are closer to that tribal way of living, they have, a lot of Pacific Island, Samoan cultures, New Zealand, the Maoris. There's a whole lot of people in that family, a lot of European cultures. I think in a lot of ways, Australia and America being such a mix of ethnicity, such a mix of cultures, we've lost a lot of that, unfortunately, where we're very insular in our family. So therefore, it's more important that we're connected.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that having community is a good place to start. And again, when I started this thing, I didn't have much of a plan. I knew how to podcast. So I was like, oh, that's an easy kill. Facebook groups are easy. Let's start it off. Right. And within the first 30 days, I had 5 or 10 people, and it's just exponentially grown, which is great and all. But I didn't come into this thing with a plan. I didn't come into this thing thinking, I'm going to make money off this. No, I came into it because I want to create a space and I want to create a community where people can come in, and then the community grows itself, right? And then having the right conversations with the right people like yourself and James and all the other people that they have great information to contribute, which not only helps people, but also normalizes. And a lot of times that has it just sounds so odd. And sometimes I just hate to say it, but we do need to make sure that it's normal to have these conversations. Why not? Why does it have to be so weird to talk about emotions? I mean, I did a podcast on this recently, a couple episodes ago, and where I tried to explain to people and help people understand that, look, emotions are the result. Emotions are the results of your thoughts. So if you want to talk about emotional control and talk about emotions, we're talking about self-talk. Really. So I mean, what's the problem? Why are we having such a hesitancy to talk about things?
I'll put in a very simple example. I was at Royal Military College Duntroon in Canberra, where officer cadets for the Australian Army, well, for all military arms are trained. I was down there 2 or 3 weeks ago. There was 250 officer cadets in a room. It was this big sort of stadium seating thing, and I stood there. They all came in, and then I start talking. I had a 2-hour workshop to present to them. I start talking. My computer froze, so I had no slides. So the slides of my talk froze, and I was like, right. So the first voice in my head is, oh, fuck, like, what am I going to do now? Oh, no, I'm going to look like an idiot. And then literally, because I've worked on this stuff a lot and trained myself a lot, I have 3 things that I say in my mind when I'm nervous around my work. Doing keynotes, I've spoken to hundreds of people in a room, workshops, dealing one-on-one with people, whatever the scenario is, I have these 3 words that I use, 3 statements. And I go, in my mind, I go, you're brilliant at what you do. There's no one you can't help if they'll do the work. And there's no one better than you on the planet. Now, it sounds so egotistical and it sounds so conceited, because I've got to say it that strongly, because the other voice in my head is, you're an idiot, you're a nobody, you don't even know what you're talking about. So at one end, I've got this really negative, harsh voice. So I have this extremely positive voice in my head, and it's like the 2 squirrels fighting in my head as it happens. So I stood up there, and that voice kicked in of going, you idiot, you're an imposter. What are you even doing here? They're not going to listen to you. You're not even a soldier. Like this, we knew, it's all in my mind. I'm like, oh, I knew they would find out eventually. I didn't know what I was talking about because of that same insecurity and fear everyone has. So I've got to counter this really positive mindset. So in my mind, I was just like, and in my mind, I'm like, fuck, I'm just going to smash through it. And it ended up being one of the best presentations I've ever done. And I had no notes. I had no anything. And I just literally spoke from the heart. Now, I had a rough idea of the structure of it, but most of my presentations are done by reading the room. And that means by being emotionally connected to what's resonating and what's not. And at the end of it, there was 3 of fairly senior military leaders there who came over to me, and I was for about an hour talking to different soldiers. Some of the cadets came up and spoke to me, and these are all people in their sort of 20s. And these 3 guys, sort of my age, came over at the end, and they were like, hey, that was brilliant. I said, oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And this guy goes, no, I don't think you get it. He goes, mate, that was amazing. He said, because it was a Friday afternoon at 2:30. They'd just come in from an hour's PT session where they'd been absolutely smashed. And unbeknownst to me, they'd been on a 14-day bush exercise. So they'd been out bush for 14 days, got back at 11 p.m. the night before. So they were tired. They'd been couldn't have been worse. Now, I didn't know that going into it. And one of them in particular goes, I've been here for 2 years and had 4 groups of these people go through, or more. Yeah, anyway, so multiple groups of these people go through. I've never seen a group as engaged. I was like, oh, wow, thanks. Like, I really appreciate that. And he goes, and he kept saying, I don't think you get it. Now, I don't get it. But that could have gone horribly if I let the fear get in the way. But I just went, I'm not going to fail these people because my computer froze. I'm not going to, what am I going to do when I'm there to talk about leadership and resilience and culture? Am I going to say to them, high performance, oh, sorry, guys, I can't do my talk now because my computer broke? Like that, So as a stepdad, as a parent, as whatever, when you get your coffee in the morning, if you're just showing up as your best version, and even though the fear and the doubt's there, even though you're worried that people are going to think you look like an idiot, even though you're worried that your kids are going to think you're a goose, just acknowledge to yourself that anybody that has teen in their age, anybody who's a teenager looks at anybody that's 15 years older and more and thinks they're an idiot and doesn't know what they're talking about. Just accept they're going to think that. They're going to look at you and think you're a moron. I talked to my daughters probably 12 months ago. I had a conversation with them about something. I said, dudes, do you guys get that I get paid to do this for a job? I said, I have CEOs of companies. I have senior military leaders, police leaders. I have people, lawyers, doctors. I have all these people come to me and they pay me for my advice. And I said, and I talk to you and you look at me like I'm a moron. And my youngest daughter goes, you're not their dad though, right? And I was like, no. And she goes, just looks at me. And I went, great point.
Kid.
Right. So you just acknowledge that. And I have seen enough stuff with my kids, some other kids, like there's a number of different, my niece and nephew, another young guy whose dad died in the police who I spent a fair bit of time with. When they look at you and talk to you, they roll their eyes and their reaction is like you're an idiot. But you see in their behavior, if you stay the course and stay connected and you stay influential and loving to them, and you're doing it from your heart to be the best person you can be as their stepdad or as their dad, then they're naturally going to, it gets in, it seeps in. Even though they won't ever admit it, you have that impact. If you're standing back waiting for them to come to you, it's a disproportionate structure that they're never going to come to you and have the vulnerability because you're the parent, you're the male. There's a whole lot of stuff for kids to come to you as their dad is challenging, let alone their stepdad is even more challenging. So you can't use excuse of, oh, I'm here to talk to them if they want to talk. That's just cowardice. You've got to be the one going out and putting yourself out there first because they're not going to do it.
Yeah, that's true, man. You talk about accountability, and it's about you need to be the one that takes, which is interesting because sometimes it's putting yourself out there in a way that's welcoming. Like it's almost like this dance, right? Like, so you got to make yourself available and you got to figure it out. What's the most effective means, right? Because it's not going and beating down their door and saying, hey, I'm your guy, because you might not be,
absolutely.
My two stepsons, they have an engaged father. He spends time with them. They go biking together. They go to skate park. Like, he's an engaged father. They don't need another dad. They just need me to be loving and caring. That's it.
You just need to be this other cool dude that they can come and talk to, because they will definitely, and I think as a stepdad, there's such an opportunity, or a stepmom, because there's going to be things that kids do not want to talk to their parents about. Like, so many things. I've got a 14-year-old girl who I help out a lot, who's been through some significant challenges with self-harm and different things because of a violent background with her dad. Now, I've had maybe half a dozen conversations with her face-to-face. The first time I met her, a week later, she rang me. So it was the same woman that I spoke to about the sexual abuse stuff. When I spoke to her, she said about the kids, there's a lot of challenge. I said, why don't I just come and have dinner with you and your kids? And she's like, yeah, sure. And it's a weird thing. But I go out, sit down and have dinner with them, meet them. I said, look, your mum and I are friends. I've done some work with her. We've got mutual friends. She knows I'm a good guy. So I didn't say that to the kids, but just for information, I said, your mum and I have had this chat that if you want to ever talk to me, you can talk to me. And so long as you're not in danger, it will stay between us. And yeah, cool. A week later, the girl texts me and goes, I really need to talk to you. I was like, okay, hun, no dramas. I rang her and she goes, look, I've done something. I'm really scared. I don't want to tell mum. I didn't know who to talk to, so I'd called you. And I said, cool. So I met this kid a week before, mate. We'd spent 2 hours together. I'm like, yeah, no worries, hun. That's absolutely fine, sweetheart. What's going on? And I'm talking to her like I would talk to my daughter, right? And it's a challenge. I don't know this kid. She's a 14-year-old girl. I'm a 50-year-old man at the time. There's a whole lot of minefields there to be so cautious of. And she goes, I've been cutting myself. And I was like, oh, okay, duh. That's not great. In my head, I think, holy fuck, what am I going to do with this? Like, right. Jesus. And I remember vividly where I was, mate. I was driving in the car. I pulled over and parked. And we had this conversation. I said, oh, why are you doing that? And she goes, it makes me emotional. She goes, because the pain of that stops me killing myself. And I was like, holy shit. I said, okay, honey, that's pretty tough stuff, right? Are you happy to talk to me? Yep. So we had this whole conversation. And I was just running from my heart, right? She's got a psychologist she talks to. And you can see the emotion, right? I felt it, because I'm like, I could literally have this kid's life in my hands here. I don't know. She's got no one else she feels she can talk to. We went through this whole conversation, and I just sort of ran from the heart, mate. And I said, honey, this shit sucks, right? It's really tough. I get it. And I was using language with her. I said, this is fucked. And she laughed. She goes, oh, I said, I know adults aren't supposed to say that. I go, but this isn't a normal conversation, darling. She goes, no, went through this whole chat. I said, you know what I can do for you? I said, keep working with you, but talk to her, the psychologist. I said, she's brilliant. You got to keep talking to her. I said, I'm not a psychologist, but I've been through some shit. I said, I can help you. She will help you trim the tree back and keep it under control. That's what her job is. If you want to, we can pull the tree out by the roots and solve this problem. I'm making this shit up as I'm going along, but I'm just giving it to her like it's true, right? She respects me. I said to her, so honey, here's the thing. And I went through a whole lot of stuff about why it was happening. I won't go into, but it was pretty obvious what was going on, and a lot of impact about her dad and other things. And I said, I asked her some questions about that. There'd been some physical, not sexual, but physical abuse where he'd been pretty violent. I said, honey, so your body's just trying to protect you and save you. It's like a horror movie. I went through some of that stuff. And in the end, she was like, yep. I said, hey, she goes, no, you're right. That's good. I said, now go and get mum. And I said, I want you to give your mum the phone while I talk to her, because she goes, mum's going to be so mad and blah, blah, blah. I said, she won't be, darling. I said, you give the phone to your mum. You watch her expression as I talk to her. She'll be fine. I promise you she'll be fine. She goes, okay. And I'm like, holy shit, this is a risk. She gives the phone to the mum, and I said, hey, it's me. She goes, yeah. And I could hear in her voice, she's like, the daughter's just walked up, given her the phone. She doesn't know I'm talking to her. So her mum's sort of like, what's going on? And I said, do not react. She goes, okay. I said, you've got to control your reaction. She goes, yeah, okay. I said, there's some issues. And I said, her daughter's name. I said, she's been self-harming. She's good. We've had a massive chat. I need you to just look after, like, love her. I said, so she goes, hold on, hugs her, gives her a kiss, picks up the phone. I said, what happened? She told me. I said, cool. I said, put her back on the phone. So she put her back on the phone. I said, hey, honey, how'd mum react? She goes, oh my God, you were right. I said, of course I'm right. I said, you're fine, darling. She's like, okay. I said, all right, talk to mum. I'm here for you any time. I hung up, burst into tears. So that was like, I think it was in the afternoon. The mum rang me back that night and goes, holy shit. She goes, she's opened up to me more now than ever. Went through this whole thing. Now, mate, I had no right to be in that kid's life. I had no right to have that conversation. Anybody else would say to me, what you should have done was say, ring kids helpline, get the mum on the phone, get her to a site, do something. But this kid's reached out to me, and I'm like, I've got this opportunity that may never come again for anyone with this young woman. And now mum said to me since then, I've caught up with a girl, the biggest issue the kid brings me about now, we caught up the other day for lunch, and because she was feeling pretty stressed. And I said, what are you stressed about? She goes, oh, this girl, she's been really mean to me and blah, blah. So she's back in a normal teenage shit, right? Girls being mean to each other, whatever. And I said, well, honey, I said, that's a pretty cool problem to have compared to a year and a half ago, right? Remember that conversation? And her younger sister, who's 11, is there, and she knows what's happened. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, do you remember that day you called me? She goes, yeah. I said, remember what we talked about? She goes, oh, yeah. And I said, so, and this, her and I were chatting on our own at this point. And I said, how you been going with that? And I've talked to her heaps of times about that. She goes, oh no. She goes, I haven't cut myself again since we spoke that day. Now that was just because, mate, for no other reason than I was willing to be really emotionally connected and vulnerable to that kid. And I do that with people. I've got two girls who are 31, just happened both be 31. One's a police detective. One's an Indigenous Australian, a part Indigenous girl, grew up in heaps of domestic violence. Dad was, pretty difficult individual, in and out of jail, in a small country town, heaps of violence. The other one grew up in England, similar thing, a lot of violence, really, really challenging dad. I met both those women, one through CrossFit. I've been like a dad to her for 7 years. I caught up with her yesterday with her daughter, who's my goddaughter. She's like my granddaughter. We have these beautifully emotionally connected conversations. She's gone on to be an ambassador for domestic violence with a couple of foundations here, written a book. She's just launched her own podcast. All of that off the back of our relationship and me supporting her, and she's done all the work. But me going, hun, you can be anyone. Like, you need to tell your story. You need to get out and do shit. Rachel and I were in a bridal party at a wedding. I made the father speech at a wedding. I met this woman through CrossFit. She's a very, very attractive, very fit young woman. We ended up catching up for a coffee one day. We were talking about stuff at training to help her with some mindset about sport. She told me her story. And I said, so she's in Brisbane on her own. Her family's probably 10 hours away. She doesn't have any uncles or anything that's around her. I said, who do you talk to for advice? She goes, oh, well, and she wasn't married or whatever at that point. She goes, oh, well, no one. She was single. I said, well, look, I said, hun, I'm old enough to be your dad. I said, this isn't some weird sexual thing. I said, I'm not trying to pick you up. I'm not trying to sleep with you. Let's just get that off the table. I said, I'm old enough to be your dad. Why don't we have that relationship? She's like, oh, okay. I said, that's weird as fuck, isn't it? That conversation. She goes, yeah. And I go, who does that? Like, who as a 44 or whatever I was year-old man, 43-year-old man at that point, sits down with this really attractive 24-year-old girl and goes, hey, can I be your dad? Like, that's
weird.
Most people would, weird as, mate. It's the weirdest conversation ever. But I end up with these people in my life that I have this impact as a father figure, which is beautiful for me because I don't have my daughters in my life. I get to have that impact in other people's lives because I'm willing to go first and be that emotionally connected guy. That's for your stepdads. That's go first. Like, yeah. That's it.
And it doesn't matter if you're talking to like that 24-year-old girl, you're talking to your spouse, you're talking to a group of people that you're well connected to, or a group of people that you're just now getting in with. I mean, that's what in the Facebook group, I'm trying to post things just so people see my name and see the group enough, because once people get comfortable with you, that's why we post things on Facebook and YouTube, right? Because I've actually received a couple job offers, not job offers, but contracts to come in and do presentations, because I would talk to some, they're like, oh, I'd like to learn more. I'm like, well, hey, just go watch my YouTube channel. Like, I got a whole bunch of shit on there, right? And they call me like a week later and they're like, I want to hire you. Like, no questions asked, because everything's right there. But it's the idea of when you put yourself out there, whether it's a conversation or a video or whatever, the more people see your name, the more people understand that you really have good intentions. Like, you're now personable with them, not just a person, but you are building a relationship. And so, like with the group, I'm just trying to put little things out there just so, people see what I'm all about, and to see my name and to see the group name over and over again, so that eventually now people are going to start posting and start asking questions. Okay, well, I had this, I've had some people will message me direct and say, hey, I've got this going on. Well, now I know that I'm having an impact on a few people because they're messaging me direct, asking me questions, and we're having this conversation over text message or Facebook Messenger or something like that. And then I'm throwing I'll throw their name out. I won't dime them out. I won't tell people what we're talking about, but I'm like, hey, you know what? Oh, by the way, this person, Devin is one of the guys. Devin, and we were having a conversation, and I just threw a couple things out. We had a short conversation. A couple other people hit me up. It's creating a space where now people are having the conversations that they need to have. But then on top of that, like, we're building community, right? Because that's what we all want. We all want, and
Absolutely.
it doesn't have to be 20,000 people. I don't want 20,000 people. I want, I saw a meme that I posted recently was a dedicated audience of 1 is better than a distracted audience of 1,000. And if I only reach 40 people, and I don't build a big group, okay, so be it. But maybe I turn some people onto your coaching. Maybe I turn some people onto James Golden. Maybe I turn some people onto John Maxwell. Whatever it is, I don't care who you follow, but build a group with somebody. Go find a group and go get and build that thing. So, and these are the kind of...
Mate, it is on these things.
Yeah.
We've got so many groups. There's so many people. There's so many things. And I go, and it doesn't have to be a podcast, a Facebook group. You don't have to do what you and I do, right? I only do this because I want to try and, same as you, try and give people the wisdom of my fuck-ups so they don't have to make the mistakes. That's why I do what I do. I want to try and help people to get some of the wisdom and the growth that I get from other people from my story, because I'm normally pretty good at what I put my mind to. And for the first 40-odd years of my life, it was self-destruction. So I've got a fair bit of knowledge and experience in how not to do it, right? But I go down to the simplest thing, Neil, that I say to people, whether I am talking to 250 military cadets the other day, whether I'm talking to one of my executive coaching clients who's worth tens of millions of dollars, whether I'm talking to the barista in the freaking coffee shop in the morning when I get my coffee, I'm the same guy. I'm the same dude everywhere I go. And I was at the coffee shop this morning after training, and I've only been training at that particular CrossFit box for a couple of months. And the lady who runs the coffee shop, it's really busy in the morning, and she's probably about my age, a bit younger, pretty gruff individual, really funny woman. And her name's Kylie. And I would go in there with the other CrossFit people, and they're like, "Hey, Kylie." She's like, "Hi, hey." And as soon as I got there, I was like, "Okay, hey." I introduced myself to her. I said, "Hey, Kylie, I'm Shaun, blah, blah." She goes, "Oh, cool." I said, "No, nice to meet you." And then every time, and I don't go in there at often, maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks. It's not every day. And I'll walk in there and go, hey guys, good morning, how are you? And they're like, yeah. And they sort of like look up like, yeah, good. Because they're not used to people being engaged like that. And I will have a joke with her or whatever, and they'll walk in this morning, and I'm like, "Hey guys," and they'll look up, they go, "Oh, hey, how you going? Yeah, hi Shaun, how are you? Yeah, good." And I said to Kylie, I said, "You look a bit flat today." I said, what big night last night?" She goes, "Oh yeah, I had too many drinks, I'm a bit hungover." I said, well, I said, stop being so cranky. Why don't you perk up and smile? You know, had a joke with her and she laughed. Everyone, like we're just joking together, because I'm being that same emotionally connected person. I'm not walking up to the counter of their coffee shop with this scowl on my face. And I also know I've got this resting angry divot in my forehead, so I look like a pretty angry dude. So I'm not walking up and like standing there waiting for them to connect first. I go, I want my life to be full of awesome connections with people. I want to have great interactions with people, whoever I meet. And I find the majority of people challenging. Like, I find 85% of people pretty difficult because they're living behind the mask of fear and insecurity. They're pretending to be something they're not. It's about what car they drive. It's about what watch they wear, how much money they make, some other bullshit about how many Instagram likes you've got or whatever, shit that is, that we've lost the ability to actually be connected as people. Yeah. And to me, I'm like, I just want to be someone who selfishly for me has a great time with people. And then if that flows out and they get impacted, great. I'm not trying to be Jesus Christ. I'm not trying to turn up and be like, listen to my wisdom, like, at all. I'm like, listen, I've got some ideas about things. If you make my coffee, I go, good morning, hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow, whatever. And they go, oh yeah, thanks. Whether I've never been to that place before, or whether it's my niece and nephew, who every time I see them, I go, you guys know I love you, right? And they go, yep. I go, awesome. Whether it's whoever it is in my life, it's being connected to these people. And selfishly, I end up with all these people around me that love me. Where's the loss?
Yeah. No problems here. All right, dude. I've taken way too much of your time, and I really appreciate it. This has been great. This is everything that I thought it would be. And I built you coming on the show. I built it up to quite a few people, so I'm really looking forward to getting this one out to everybody.
I'm glad I told you that now and not before.
Yeah, man. So you have your coaching, your website is the Strong Life Project. You have the Strong Life Project is also the name of your podcast. It's a daily thing, and huge kudos to you, because man, I try to come up with content and I end up writing stuff for like 2 or 3 days, and in that amount of time you put out 4 or 5 episodes. I'm like, geez, this guy is like a monster. But it's good information, and it's so well done because it's your life. It's just you, right? So yeah, it's good stuff. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to continuing a good collaboration type relationship with you, man. I love your stuff. I follow your stuff. Always looking for opportunities to share. If there's anything that I can do for you, by all means, reach out, man.
Appreciate that. I want, for your audience, if they go to thatstronglifeproject.com, and I know we'll put these links in the show notes, everything that I talk about is based on 6 fundamentals, right? It's about your sleep, nutrition, training, meditation, journaling, mental rehab, which is about podcasts, books, educating yourself. There's a 30-minute free video course on there. They go and put their name and email address in there. I'm not going to spam them with emails. It's not how I roll. But if people want to know where to start in this stuff, that's where to start. Get your basic foundation in your sleep well, training well, eating well, because then your neurology, your neurochemistry is really even. You have more dopamine and serotonin, less cortisol, there's less adrenaline, there's less stress. When you're stressed, literally the fight or flight response in our body scientifically shuts down the prefrontal cortex. You have half a brain. The part that gives you the rational thought process and decision-making ability shuts down under stress. That's why we react emotionally and we act, sometimes not great. If you can get that under control, and those 6 things I talk about is absolutely how to get it under control, you're just naturally a better human being. You're happier. At the end of the day, I want to help people be happier. You're trying to help people be happier. That's all we're after, right? So if they go and check that out, look at thestronglifeproject.com. There's heaps of articles on there. There's my coaching stuff. There's all sorts of stuff on there for them to look at. And then go to the Strong Life Project podcast, wherever you get podcasts. And there's, if you've enjoyed listening to me ramble, there's 1,855, I think, 10-minute episodes of me rambling. So you've got plenty of content. If you hated listening to me, don't go over there because you'll hate it even more.
Well, get on them. And I'm looking forward to, I know we've got clearly, people in the US. I know I've got some UK listeners. I don't think I got anybody down in Australia yet. So I guess if there's anybody from Australia listening, hit me up and let me know. Because one of the things I'm looking at doing is, doing not only online summits, but also in-person get-togethers and retreats, you know, and I've got a plan, you know, for the US and, you know, Canada and possibly going to the UK. But hey, man, if we get some fans that going on down in Australia, I haven't been down there yet. I would love to come down and do a champion stepdad retreat.
Absolutely. And what I'll do is I'll share this out through my audience as well. So hopefully that, you know, some guys who are in that scenario get onto your stuff, because, mate, I love what you do. And we've had these conversations, your military background, all of that. I think it's that want to serve people. And, mate, thanks for what you do, because I think it's fantastic for somebody to be as open and honest as you are, to have, and, you know, that speaks volumes, the fact you have someone like me on, who some of your listeners have heard I use some language and I'm pretty raw with some things sometimes. That you know, a lot of people don't have that courage to be that open, right? So thanks for what you do, Neil. I really appreciate it and look forward to working together.
Right on, brother. Thanks a lot. That's it, dude. I really appreciate it. That was a long episode, and I appreciate you just going, dude, and just rolling and just letting you go as long as you wanted to. I think that was great. So I really appreciate your time. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you get to your day. Tell everybody down there that we said hey. And I did. So you and Rach aren't married, right?
No. So we've been together 7.5 years, but we're not actually married. Yeah. So it's something we've talked about a lot, actually.
Yeah.
But that's more.
What does she do?
So she works in high performance. So she does. She's an ex-Commonwealth Games and World Champions, and was actually about to qualify for Olympic gymnast. And she's, what am I, 51? She's 45 years of age. She's done a fair bit of stuff with a couple of NBA teams over there with mindset and high performance, some stuff with medicine. She before COVID went to the States pretty regularly. So she does a lot of that. She's a physiotherapist. We call physical therapists, you guys call them, by trade. But so she's a medical professional, but mate, she does a very similar thing I do. So we have these chats all the time, which is just amazing. She's a big part of the reason I'm the man I am today compared to where I was 10 years ago. Right. She's managed to improve me fairly significantly, I think.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny because Cindy, she was a medic for 20 years, finished up her Homeland Security master's degree, and she wants to do like emergency management, stuff like that. But honestly, not at all interested in what I do. Like, you know, we'll talk about some stuff, but you know, really it comes down to it. She's just like, I don't care. She's like, I get so bored listening to you talk.
And mate, don't get me like Rachel and I have great chats, but she never listens to my podcast. She like, I've written a book about my stuff that some of your listeners might enjoy. They'll find them on the website. But even that sort of stuff, she's read it once. But I'll go, I did, this. I got some great feedback on this awesome thing, and she's like, oh yeah, honey, that's great. And I said to her before, like, so you don't get really that excited about my stuff. She goes, no, well, that's your stuff. I go, and that's not a bad thing either, right? But it's so funny, mate. So funny.
That's good stuff, man. All right, brother, have a great day. I will talk to you soon. Thanks, bud.
So much to your listeners for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And if they listen to this and like it, shoot me a message. I'd love to hear from them. That'd be great.
I will definitely connect. I'll make sure all the information is in there, because I would love to send some people your way, man.